This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, folks. Hello. Welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Your one-stop shop for all your podcasting needs. We got you covered when it comes to sports, when it comes to basketball, football, baseball, fantasy football, wrestling, life in general, business, relationships, whatever you may need, we got you covered here at the GSMC Podcast Network. But this is the GSMC Sports Podcast, and I am your host, Shaq Scott, here for another great episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. And folks, we got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to cover the topic of the NCAA Elite 8 tournament for both the men and women, and why someone here is going to be eating humble pie. I won't say who. We're also going to talk about Russell Westbrook versus the world. We're then going to jump into the MLB and its opening day upcoming. And then finally, we're going to end our show today talking about Kevin Durant and some more social media beef. I know, surprise, surprise. But like I said, guys, welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast. I am your host, Shaq Scott. Glad to have you guys here. We appreciate you for listening. However you may be listening, wherever you may be listening, we just appreciate you guys for tuning in for another great edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast. And if this is your first time, welcome. I'm Shaq Scott. So let's get it started, folks. I talked about the idea of someone eating some humble pie. So let me go ahead and change my tone here a little bit. So if this is your first time listening, welcome. But if it isn't your first time listening, you know, on last episode, someone got a little bit ahead of themselves and predicted a certain team to come out on top in the NCAA tournament. You know, someone was a little bit excited about the NCAA March Madness being back for both the men and women's, and someone just got a little bit ahead of themselves and was calling for a winner pretty early, you know, from the get-go. This particular person was very excited, and that person is going to get served up a nice dose of humble pie today. And that person is me, folks. I, Shaq Scott, am here to receive my humble pie. And I do like my pie warm. So if you're here to serve me my humble pie, please make sure it's warmed up for me. A nice dose of, a nice side of ice cream. Non-dairy, of course, because your boy is lactose intolerant. But I will accept my humble pie here because I call the Michigan Wolverines winning it all. And, of course, that can't be possible because my Wolverines got knocked out of the NCAA tournament. They got knocked out of the NCAA tournament. So let's jump right in. We're going to start with the men's, and then we're going to jump to the women's side of the Elite 8 NCAA March Madness tournament, or I like to call it the March Madness Mania because it has been crazy this year. So we saw these past couple of days, Gonzaga take on USC. So the number 1 versus the number 6 seed, the Gonzaga versus USC, the Trojans. We all sat here and wanted to call an upset, myself being included. I was hoping that Gonzaga would get knocked off, but I said it on last episode. I did not see them losing, and I did see them potentially going to the Final Four, and I was very correct in that prediction because Gonzaga gave a whooping to the USC Trojans. 85-66 was the final score in that matchup, and boy, was it not close at all. Gonzaga looks pretty good, guys. Whether you want to admit it or not, and by you, I'm referring to myself, they look pretty good, and they're undefeated. They have not lost a game. And I refuse to keep disrespecting them. So, Gonzaga fans out there, I apologize. I'm apologizing. You have my undivided attention. I'm sorry. I apologize. You still aren't going to win the championship, in my opinion. But I'm sorry. You have my opinion. I'm sorry. You have my attention. I'm sorry for disrespecting you guys and constantly picking against you. But they knocked off the USC Trojans, so shout out to the Gonzaga. Then we saw Baylor take on Arkansas. This was an interesting matchup. The Baylor Bears had a pretty close and tough matchup with Arkansas. But in the end, the number 3 ranked Arkansas, in the end, the Baylor Bears were managed to pull off that one 81-72. 81-72 was the final score in that matchup. And then we went over to the other side of the bracket, and we saw Oregon State and Houston face off against each other. And this one was a tightly contested matchup. You know, Oregon State, if you haven't been watching, they are known for playing zone defense. And in this matchup, they did play a lot of zone defense. And I watched this game from start to finish. And it was giving Houston some trouble for a good portion of the game. But Oregon State could not rebound the basketball to save their lives. They struggled with offensive rebounding. And in the end, they ended up being the difference maker as Houston came out on top. The shout out to Houston. You know, Houston 67-61 was the final score. They ended up coming out on top. Kelvin Sampson, the head coach for the Houston Cougars, shout out to them. They played their butts off. You know, I don't know what else to say. They did what was expected of them. And shout out to Houston. You know, shout out to everybody in Houston. If you go back in time, the Phi Slamma Jamma era was the last time Houston was relevant. That's not the case right now, but they're relevant for different reasons. And shout out to Houston, you know, knocking off Oregon State, making themselves known. They're going to face Baylor in the Final Four. And the last matchup, folks, this is where I had to eat the humble pie. But in my defense, I did call that this game was going to be close. I said it was going to be tightly contested. I did not predict that Michigan would win handily. I said they were going to win a close one versus UCLA. Little did I know they would go away from performing any type of offense the past 3 minutes of the game. But that's neither here nor there, because I'm here and Michigan is there, and by there I mean home, watching the rest of the tournament with me. So Michigan loses to UCLA 51-49. The 11th-seeded UCLA Bruins lose to the Michigan Wolverines, the number 1 ranked Michigan Wolverines. My top pick to win it all. I'm sorry, Wolverine fans. You can blame the jinx on me, but they were unable to pull it off. Michigan loses to the UCLA Bruins, and a shocker to all. Now, Michigan, I will say, is without their best player, and they have been without their best player since the conference tournament. Not an excuse, because they've been playing well throughout the tournament. But this game was a highly contested defensive game, and they clearly needed a go-to scorer. There were some moments in the game in which you can tell they were going to the post. There were a couple point guards that would come in and out and try to force up a shot or force up a three, and they just looked out of sync. And you could tell that they definitely needed a go-to scorer. And this is when I think the first time in a tournament that you could tell, like, yeah, they were out without their best player, and you truly could tell. But shout out to UCLA. That's no excuse for Michigan losing. UCLA Bruins, Mick Cronin, very impressive win. I wish he were to be wearing his mask a little bit more on the sidelines. Nothing frustrates me more than watching him continuously like fidget with his mask and it being upside down for OCD purposes. It just drives me insane, but I'm going to have to watch it some more because the UCLA Bruins are moving on to face Gonzaga in the Final Four. So our Final Four matchup, we got Gonzaga versus UCLA, and we got Baylor versus Houston. Now, the Houston Cougars, 28-3 this year, they came in the number 2 seed. And, you know, they beat all double-digit ranked seeded teams to get to this point in the tournament. So they ran through Cleveland State, and then they barely beat Rutgers, and then they knocked off Syracuse and Buddy Boeheim, and then they ended up beating Oregon State. Now, I will give them credit because throughout the year, they've been ranked the number 1 in defensive effective field goal percentage, and they've been the number 2 offensive rebounding team thus far in the season. And in my personal opinion, they've been the number 1 ranked offensive rebounding team in the tournament. They look really good. And they're going to face off against the Baylor Bears. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. Now, for those of you who haven't been watching the Baylor Bears this year, they came into the tournament 26-2. They were the number 1 seed. They knocked off Hartford initially, then Wisconsin, then Villanova, then Arkansas. And if you haven't watched them, they are the number 1 ranked 3-point percentage team in the tournament. So they shoot the ball very well. And they have a Donovan Mitchell clone by the name of Davion Mitchell, who wears number 45. Who has leg sleeves like Donovan Mitchell, very similar game to Donovan Mitchell. There were jokes going on social media when Baylor first got into the tournament. Donovan Mitchell had an extra year of eligibility and came back to play for Baylor because this kid looks just like him on the court. Davion Mitchell, though, has been playing really, really well for Baylor, so shout out to Baylor. But they face off against the Houston Cougars, so we will see who will end up winning that matchup. And in just a second, I'll tell you who I got winning that matchup. And then we go on to the Gonzaga Bulldogs, who come into this game 30-0, the number 1 seeded team in the West region. They ran through Norfolk State 98-55, and then they beat the number 8 Oklahoma, the number 8 seeded Oklahoma Sooners 87-71. Then they knocked off Creighton, and then finally USC most recently. And their biggest strength thus far is they have the best 2-point percentage in the history of the NCAA tournament thus far. So Gonzaga has been what I will admit, and as much as I keep saying I don't want to hate on them, I'm trying very carefully not to hate. I don't want it to come across as hate. But Gonzaga has been very consistent throughout this tournament. You know, Jalen Suggs is super impressive and somebody that I'm looking forward to making an impact in the NBA next year. And I could definitely see him fitting with the team like Orlando or Atlanta or whoever he ends up falling to. But he is very impressive. And to watch him play for Gonzaga this year, they have been very relentless, both offensively and defensively. And it shows. It shows that, like I said last show, they beat teams by double digits consistently. And they've done it since like the 3rd week of the college basketball season this year. They don't let up. The whole entire game, they are whooping up on teams. So that's a scary sight for a team like UCLA, who comes into the game 22-9, the number 11 seed. But in my opinion, with all the momentum in the world, they won the first 4 matchup and then make it to the final 4. You know, they started off beating Michigan State 86-80 in overtime to start off the NCAA tournament. Then they went through BYU pretty handily. Then they beat Abilene Christian in overtime. And then they beat Alabama. And then now they beat Michigan. And they're really, really good at limiting turnovers. If you don't watch if you haven't watched the UCLA Bruins thus far, they are really, really good at the amount of turnovers that they end up giving up. They're very cautious with the basketball. They make very calculated decisions, and that could come in handy when you play a defensive team like Gonzaga. So it'll be an interesting matchup, and I do predict it'll be a close game. I don't think Gonzaga is going to blow this one out of the water. And if they are going to get tested, it's going to be this game. So now that we've gone through these Final Four matchups, before we jump into the women's side, let me give you a quick prediction here. So let's go with Gonzaga Gonzaga versus UCLA or Houston versus Baylor. Who do I have winning? All right, folks. Here's a call from me, Shaq Scott. I'm going to call UCLA beating Gonzaga, and you're probably like, whoa, shocker, he's never picked Gonzaga. Yes, I did pick them last round in my defense. I don't think they're going to make it to the championship. They're getting knocked off by the UCLA Bruins. The Bruins are going to the championship. Mick Cronin is going to the championship. I'm going to have to watch him fidget with that mask all the way to the championship. Mick Cronin and the UCLA Bruins are going to the national championship. Book it. Mark it down. No more humble pie for Shaq. I'm calling it UCLA versus the winner of the Houston and Baylor matchup, who I predict will be Baylor. I don't see the Baylor Bears losing this one. They look really, really impressive. And the Donovan Mitchell clone, Davion Mitchell, is going to carry the Baylor Bears to the national championship. And I won't give you my prediction today. Next time we tune in, you'll hear my prediction. But today, you won't get my prediction. I have the Baylor Bears versus the UCLA Bruins in my national championship. What say you? Let me know your opinions in the comments below. Interact with me on social media. Let me know what you think. But before we let go of this NCAA topic, we have to talk about our women's side. The women's side, and I have a lot to say, and there's a very particular person I have a lot to say too. So let's go to the women's side of the bracket. The NCAA women's bracket was not one to sneeze at all. No pun intended there. Make sure you're being COVID safe. We had Stanford go against Louisville, UConn against Baylor, Arizona and Indiana, and then South Carolina versus Texas. So let's start with that South Carolina-Texas matchup. South Carolina versus Texas. That was the 1 versus the 6. And South Carolina destroyed Texas, folks. If you didn't watch the game, 62-34 was the final score. And the whole entire fourth quarter, Texas did not score a single point. Yes, you heard me. The Texas Longhorns did not score a single point in the whole fourth quarter versus South Carolina. The first time in NCAA March Madness women's history that has ever happened. 62-34 is the final score, so you can tell South Carolina was pretty dominant in that game. We move on over to the number 3 Arizona versus number 4 Indiana, and Arizona won that matchup 66-53. Moving on to the final four, where they faced the winner of the UConn versus Baylor matchup. And I'm going to let's save that matchup. Before I talk about that matchup, let's go to the other side. Stanford versus Louisville, the 1 versus the 2. This one was we were all expecting to be a tightly contested matchup, but it really wasn't. Stanford won the game going away by 15 points. And now we'll go back over to this UConn-Baylor matchup, the 1 versus the 2. Now, this is the game that I was telling you guys about was going to be a great game. It's going to be highly contested. Paige Beckers has been killing in the tournament thus far, and the game did not disappoint. I watched it from start to finish amongst all the other greats out there. So LeBron James was tuned in, Damian Lillard, Diana Taurasi, all of the sports world was watching. If you don't believe me, check social media, go through the timeline, type in UConn versus Baylor. Everybody gave their personal opinion on the game. Everybody was tuned in. Why? Because the game was highly contested. To see Paige Beckers, it came down to the end, and in the end, UConn pulled off the victory 69-67, but not without some controversy. Some controversy happened in the last second because a Baylor guard drove to the basket, put up a layup, and was seemingly fouled by 2 UConn players. There was no foul call. The game ended with UConn Huskies being the victor. Now, sports Twitter went insane. LeBron James tweeted, "Where's the foul? That's an obvious foul." Other NBA players, Damian Lillard tweeted, "That's a foul." There were some on the other side who decided to play the other side of saying all ball. But for the majority, the general public believed that a foul should have been called for this last second shot in the UConn versus Baylor matchup. But a foul wasn't called. And in the end, Gino Auriemma and Paige Beckers and the UConn Huskies and all the great legacy that is following the UConn Husky organization in school moves on to their 13th straight Final Four, where they will face off against Arizona in the 1 versus the 3 matchup. And then on the other side, we have Stanford and South Carolina. Now, that Stanford and South Carolina game is going to be a really good game. This Connecticut versus Arizona game, I have Connecticut pulling it off. As you guys, if you haven't listened to previous episodes, I have Connecticut winning it all. Standing by that opinion, I have not had to eat any more humble pie because of that, because they've been playing very well thanks to Paige Beckers, and I hope that keeps up. And we can say Connecticut will be the eventual national champion, in my personal opinion. Now, we're not going to move off of this UConn-Baylor matchup because I have just one more thing to talk about. At the end of the matchup, UConn and Baylor, you have your post-game press conferences. Gino Auriemma responded to LeBron James and said he never felt like there was ever a situation in which LeBron James ever felt like there wasn't a foul call that should have been a foul call, basically taking a shot back at LeBron James, saying, mind your own business, it wasn't called a foul, the game's over, why are we still talking about it? That wasn't a big news out of the post-game press conference. The big news out of the post-game press conference came from the Baylor Bears head coach. You may be saying, "Oh, was there? What could be the big news coming out of that press conference? They lost." Well, Baylor women's head coach Kim Mulkey had some suggestions about COVID testing in regards to the Final Four appearance. So, and this is a direct quote from her post-game conference, and I quote, "I don't think my words will matter," Mulkey said, after Baylor's loss to UConn 69-67 in Elite 8, but they need to dump the COVID testing. Wouldn't it be a shame to keep COVID testing and you've got kids that end up testing positive or something and they don't get to play in the Final Four? So you just need to forget the COVID test and let the 4 teams that are playing in each Final Four go battle it out. What? What are you talking about? What the heck are you talking about? What are you talking about? Kim Mulkey, please tell me, what are you talking about? So you're telling me in the midst of a pandemic and everything that we're going on, we're grateful to have sports back. We're grateful to be able to play the NCAA tournament just a little bit over a year removed from the coronavirus shutting down sports as we know it in general and having to come back with the condensed version of a bunch of the sports we have. You're telling us, you know what, throw everything out the window. We've made it this far, but what does that mean? Throw everything out the window. Let's not worry about COVID testing because it would be a shame for kids to have to miss a matchup for COVID testing. You know what would be a shame? For kids to be affected the rest of their life because of catching COVID as well. They already are stressed out enough about having to play the game that they love in the midst of a pandemic, and you want to further put them at risk by not even testing them. Not even testing them. And what does your opinion matter? You're about to be sitting on the couch with me watching a game. Why? You know, she verbatim said, And I quote, let me get this quote exactly right because I'm getting a little bit heated here. I apologize if I'm getting heated. But she said, I don't think my words will matter. Guess what? They don't matter. They truly don't. They don't matter. So don't give me this opinion. This is trash. This is a trash opinion. This is a complete trash opinion. The dumbest thing I think I've heard anybody say all year long. The dumbest thing. I don't think my words will matter, but they need to dump the COVID testing. Dump the COVID testing. Because of the COVID testing, we've been allowed to at least still have basketball this year. Thankfully, because of the protocols that have been put into place, we've still been able to have basketball this year. And guess what? In the backdrop of all of this is a bunch of things that have happened because of COVID. What's not talked about are the athletes who aren't participating because of COVID complications. What's not talked about are the HBO Real Sports documentary in which they're entailing these struggling high school athletes and college athletes whose careers have been altered forever because they caught COVID. And this is not something I'm making up. This is out there. HBO Real Sports and Brian Gubble did an amazing piece recently about COVID complication that these athletes are facing. There are athletes who were on the road to the Olympic trials, people who had Division I scholarships, WNBA players who cannot lace up their own sneakers without getting tired because of complications from COVID. And you're saying, forget the COVID testing. The dumbest thing I've ever heard. You have got to be kidding me. This is the same year in which we saw the Florida Gators lose their star player to COVID. The man passed out in the middle of a game because of COVID. The middle of a game. But we don't need COVID testing, though. According to Kim Mulkey, we don't need COVID testing. No, throw it out the window. What are you talking about? What in the heck are you talking about? Shut up. Shut up, please. And I don't come on here and use my platform to tell people to shut up, but this is the dumbest thing I've heard. I'm sorry. You have to shut up, please. Watch the rest of the games with us. Go home. You guys played a great year. You have an impressive team. You're an impressive coach, but that is the dumbest thing I think I've heard anybody say all year long. Now I digress. Whew. Sorry, guys. I apologize. But I'm just sorry. We have worked so hard to finally get sports back, and we're blessed enough to be watching sporting events across the board. We got the MLB about to kick off. NFL just finished the season. NCAA March Madness tournament has been the best that we've seen in recent history in the midst of a pandemic. And we have a coach here willing to put athletes' lives further at risk. There's no point to that. What are you talking about? I'm sorry. We got to move on before I get more and more heated, man. All right, we're going to wrap up this first section of the podcast. But when we come back from our commercial break, we're going to make sure we get into Russell Westbrook versus the world. We're then going to talk about MLB opening day. And we got to end the show today talking about KD and his Twitter fingers or Instagram fingers, whatever you want to call it, social media beef nonetheless. We're going to get into all of that right after this.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. I am your host, Shaq Scott, and we have a great show thus far. So far, we talked about the NCAA March Madness Mania, as I like to call it. We got into the men's bracket, my humble pie that I had to eat, unfortunately, this weekend. We talked about the women's side of the bracket. We're impressed by Paige Beckers and the UConn Huskies. I gave my potential predictions. And And I also went on a little bit of a rant about Kim Mulkey and Baylor Bears head coach and why she needs to shut up. But we're going to move on to the rest of this show because I'm leaving that in the past. We left that on the other half of this commercial break. I kept the break. I used the break to calm down and come back down to earth. And we're going to move on to a new topic. And this topic, we're going to talk about Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook versus the world. Russell Westbrook. And you may be saying, Russell Westbrook versus the world. What's going on now? What did I miss? What happened? Well, if you've been living under a rock, like I like to say, or you just flat out haven't been paying attention recently, Russell Westbrook has been on a tear recently for Washington. A absolute tear. The past 2 games, he's posted triple-doubles. And not just normal triple-doubles. I'm not talking about a 10-point, 11 rebound, and 11 assists. No, this man's dropping 25 points, 15 rebounds, and 11 assists. 2 games in a row. Indiana Pacers got that smoke, and the Charlotte Hornets got that smoke. Now, they beat the Indiana Pacers, but they did take a loss to the Charlotte Hornets last night. That's neither here nor there, though. Russell Westbrook has been on a complete tear in the NBA this year. And you may have not noticed because Westbrook started the year in Houston but got traded back in December to the Washington Wizards. And you know, the Washington Wizards in that trade ended up giving up John Wall, and we kind of stopped paying attention to the Washington Wizards, the second John Wall. And they're been a bit of a laughing stock because they've been notorious this year for great stat lines and losses. So Bradley Beal has been on an absolute tear as well. He's been lighting up the scoreboard for the Wizards, but they keep losing. Russell Westbrook dropping triple-doubles, but they're losing. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to be positive. Talk about the positive things. I am, at least. On the other end, that hasn't been the case for all the analysts. And this is an analyst that I personally respect in the world of sports in general. Not even just basketball, in the world of sports. I respect this person's opinion. I always tune in and I'm listening and actively engaged to hear what this person has to say because they're very intelligent. This person knows what they're talking about. They've been doing what I aim to do in this business for a very long time. They got the credentials. They got the background. They got the journalist background. So they're not just talking out the side of their neck. This person knows what they're talking about, which is why I was disappointed when I heard what I heard. So I just told you Russell Westbrook's been on a tear, right? On Tuesday morning, Russell Westbrook dropped his most recent a 35-point, 20-assist triple-double. 35-point, 20-assist triple-double. You heard me. 35 points, 20-assist triple-double. Russell Westbrook is 32 years old, folks. 32, 12th year in the NBA. 32 years old, still dropping a triple-double. Now, he's averaging his lowest points per game in probably the past 7 seasons, but he's still averaging a triple-double. And guess what? He leads the league in triple-doubles. He leads the league in triple-doubles. This is the Russell Westbrook that averaged a triple-double for a whole season. The same one. The same one. But the reason I bring it up, Stephen A. Smith on Tuesday morning on his show, Stephen A. versus the World, said that, and I quote, let me sit here and get the direct quote. I apologize. Let me get the direct quote. I apologize from Stephen A. Smith. He said, in response to Russell Westbrook's impressive performance, I quote, "I'm not impressed. This stat line means nothing to me. It means nothing to me." And this is all me paraphrasing. And this is Stephen A. Smith in response to Russell Westbrook's sensational 35-point triple-double. He said, "This stat line means nothing to me. He's had a lack of success when it counts in the postseason." And so, Russell Westbrook catches wind of this along with his wife, Nina. Shout out to Russell, Nina, and the kids. And Nina went on a rant on Instagram criticizing Stephen A. Smith, saying that her husband is way more than a champion, championship, and that he's a champion of life. Now, some of you may sit back and say, "Oh, good for her. Kudos for her supporting her husband." There's some out there who are criticizing and say, "Champion of life, that sounds corny. That sounds corny. If you're not a real champion, then you're not a champion at all. You have to win the NBA championship to be a champion." That's not true. It's not true. And in response to Stephen A. Smith, Russell Westbrook said, and I quote, "I sit back. I don't say much. I don't like to go back and forth about people. But one thing I won't allow to happen anymore is to let people create narratives and constantly talking blank for no reason about me because I lay it on the line every night. I use my platform to be able to help people all across the world. Nobody can take that away from me. I've been blessed to be able to have a platform to do it. A championship won't change my life. I'm happy. I was a champion once I made it to the NBA. I grew up in the streets. I'm a champion. I don't have to be an NBA champion. Now, those words are very poignant to me, very, very poignant. But Stephen A. Smith was not done. He went then back on his show in response to Russell Westbrook's response and said, you were with Kevin Durant when you had a 3-1 lead and you lost it to Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. Kevin Durant departs. We got on Kevin Durant for leaving you high and dry. The next 3 years, you get bounced out in 5 by James Harden in Houston. You get bounced out in 6 by Donovan Mitchell. You get bounced out by Damian Lillard in 6, who not only dropped 50, but waved goodbye to you after hitting that long 3 over Paul George. Then you go to Houston last year. Then what happens? You fall in the playoffs to the Lakers. Now you're in Washington. Teammates with Bradley Beal. You're 13 games under 500, and everybody wants to talk about your numbers. And that's Stephen A. Smith's response to Russell Westbrook's response to his initial criticism. And there's a lot to unpack here, folks. And I'm going to do it respectfully because, like I said, I respect Stephen A. Smith. But words matter, Stephen A. Words matter. And I know you have a platform, just like I have a platform myself. And on your platform, you're expected to give a criticism and critique of players. But to flat out act like these numbers mean absolutely nothing unless Russell Westbrook has a championship, basically you're inferring that all these numbers are null and void? That's not true. We don't look at greats like Karl Malone, Allen Iverson, Charles Barkley as not being greats because they didn't win championships. And I'm tired of this narrative being painted on athletes that you have to win a championship to put a stamp and validate you. That's not true. There is only one Michael Jordan. There is only one Bill Russell. There is only one LeBron James. We have to appreciate these athletes that we have, and we must respect all aspects of the game. I think so often from the outside looking in, we lose perspective on how hard it is just to make it to where these athletes make it. The 12th man on the bench, it's so hard to become that player. So to not only make it from your situation that you make it from your hometown to high school to college to the NBA, and to not be a role player but a superstar, all-star, all-around great at your position, to have all that null and voided because you don't win a championship, it's nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. And I respect the heck out of Stephen A. Smith. But words matter, dog. Words matter. You have a platform. Utilize it. Uplift this man. You can still critique somebody. You can still do it in a respectful way. And yes, Stephen A. Smith did not call Russell Westbrook outside of his name, but you don't got to call me out of my name to disrespect me. You don't have to do that. How many times people out, us in public, you the listener, me, myself, people brush us off without cursing us out. It's still disrespectful. It's still disrespectful. I still get just as upset. You don't got to curse me out to disrespect me. And if there was ever anybody in the NBA who deserved all the respect right now, it's Russell Westbrook. And what for the life of me, I do not understand is why we have to be a champion to be respected. So you're telling me right now, Russell Westbrook, Damian Lillard, Chris Paul, if the three of them do not win a championship for the rest of their careers, we don't respect them and we put them in a whole different, we look at them differently. We do not. We don't. And what ends up happening so often with our athletes, and this is not specific to Stephen A., but the media in general, we do this a lot. We are so harsh and so critical of these athletes and their performances on the court that when they're gone from the sport, we then glorify and we miss their stat lines. And then we like to quote their stat lines when new athletes come along. And we'll say, oh, Zion Williamson is doing such and such. And this hasn't been done since Charles Barkley played. But all we do is talk about how Charles Barkley never won a ring. But yet we're referring to his stats. Clearly he's great. Clearly he's great. This man, Russell Westbrook, is a walking triple-double. So his wife and all of us, myself included, have every right to defend him when you try to sit here and act like his accomplishments thus far are nothing. The championship is not the end-all, be-all. Newsflash, y'all. Only one person can win the championship every year. One team. One team can win a championship every year. You don't split it. This is not the old NCAA college football where you have co-champions. Nah, bruh. One champion every year. It's hard to do. It's very hard to do. We saw Golden State get to the top and stay at the top for a while. And then we saw it all go completely away within a span of 1 year. We saw it all gone in a span of a year. And we're going to sit here and act like it's not tough to do? Come on, y'all. You got to be better than this, Stephen A. You have to be. I got so much respect for you. You have to be better than this. And I'm not just caping up for Russell Westbrook. This is for all those players who have bust their butt. You mean to tell me this is different if you're looking at a Russell Westbrook, a person who's out there stat chasing. But this man is literally giving his all on the court. Giving his all on both ends of the floor. Giving his all. He's trying to win a championship. He's in situations in which it's not happening. He ran into Dame Lillard. What was he supposed to do? Dame hit. Yeah, Dame dropped 50, but who did he hit that shot over to end that series? Was it Westbrook? No. Westbrook was trying to lock up CJ McCollum, who was cooking them too. Let's not forget that. You can't put it all on this one athlete. And he's not the one out here glorifying his stats. The media is, and rightfully so. So let's stop going in on him and nullifying his great accomplishments. Let's look at his accomplishments. Now that I'm on the top, let's look at it. You know, I'm here. He got me heated. I said I wasn't going to get mad again. I'm mad again. I'm sorry. Russell Westbrook, 2016-2017 MVP of the whole entire league. 2015-2016 All-Star Game MVP. 9-time All-Star. 19 times he's won Player of the Week. 10 times he's won Player of the Month. 10 times he's been an All-NBA. 7 times he's had shares of the MVP votes at least. 7 times. 7 times. This man is right now number 1 in the NBA in triple doubles. And newsflash, guys, the team he's playing with now, he didn't start the year with that team. He was on a completely different team and is still leading the league in triple doubles. Do you know how hard that is to do? Do you truly know how hard that is to do? Stephen A. Smith and all the fans out there. Stephen A. has played basketball, so he knows how hard it is to do. You should know how hard it is to get chemistry with your teammates. And then to go in the middle of the season to a completely different team, try to gain chemistry, and still average a triple-double? That's almost impossible. But who's doing it? Russell Westbrook. He's doing it. Russell Westbrook is doing it. And doing it well. Shout out to Ice Cube. Or LL. Sorry. Shout out to LL Cool J. Great philosopher. Everyone doesn't have to be a champion, man. I'm sorry. Everyone does not have to be a champion. And why do we always pick on Russ? Why is it Russ? What has he done to anybody? Why Russ Westbrook? Tell me. Please, somebody. Somebody out there tell me in the comments, in feedback of the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, however you interact with us, please tell me. Why do we always pick on Russell Westbrook? Why is he such an easy target? I don't get it. He's not cocky. He's come from a very humble background. We know his story. We know that he tells us he goes out there and gives it his all for his best friend who died as he was younger. This is a man who gave his all for Oklahoma City, both on and off the court. Then went to Houston, gave his all. It just didn't work out. Now he's with Washington, giving his all again. And Bradley Beal just this year said that Russell Westbrook is the best teammate he's ever had. He hasn't even been with this guy a whole year yet, and he's already saying that. That says a lot, guys. It says a lot. But we're choosing to ignore the fact of that. This man, Russell Westbrook, is a great. And what's going to happen is the second he's gone, all of a sudden, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. NBA legend Russell Westbrook. He's such a great. Doing great things both on and off the court. Russell Westbrook. Can't get enough to Russell Westbrook. A bunch of these numbers he's putting up, I don't know if we're ever going to see that again. Because he's doing it at 32. Now, Luka may give him a run for his money. And I literally, as soon as those words left my mouth, Luka, I felt like he was slapping me on the back of my neck saying, all right, keep watching. But for the time being, Russell Westbrook is a legend. And we got to keep uplifting these kings, man. We're not going to sit here and criticize and critique them at the expense of other players. Yes, LeBron James is a great. Yes, Steph Curry is a great. And yes, they both have championships, and Russell Westbrook does not. But does that mean Westbrook is any less than them? No. Russell Westbrook said, I'm a champion at life. And you know why I love that quote? Because that's called perspective. Because at the end of the day, basketball is a game. It is a game that we're blessed enough to play, or as a fan, we're blessed enough to enjoy. It is a game. He has proper perspective on life. It is not the end-all, be-all for him. But he is going to give it his all while he still is able to play it. Respect that. Respect that, Stephen A. Smith. Respect that, the rest of the world, if you agree with this quote from Stephen A. Smith. Respect that. The man is giving it his all and killing it. Flat out killing it. So if you're going to sit here and tell me, oh, Stephen A. Smith is right. He's absolutely right. Russell Westbrook he's never going to be a Steph Curry. He's never going to be a Steph Curry. Guess who he's also not going to be? A Robert Horry, a Chauncey Billups, a Rasheed Wallace. All those people have championships, but does that mean they're any greater than Russell Westbrook? You're going to sit here and tell me Chauncey Billups is a greater NBA player in the history than Russell Westbrook, all because he has a championship? Nah, I'm sorry, bro. I'm sorry. I'm not the person that's the end-all, be-all for championships. I have proper perspective, especially since I support teams that go so long in between championships. That's probably why I have such a proper perspective on championship. You know, when you root for teams that their ceiling is not too high, and you continuously watch them take first-round exits or don't make the playoffs at all or win the draft lottery, you know, that's our mini championships. You have a little bit different perspective. But that's neither here nor there. Russell Westbrook, Team Russ. I'm always Team Russ. And you should be too. And this topic had me just thinking about other names and other people that we disrespect. You know, I think about the Russell Westbrooks and how, the NBA championship makes him less of a player somehow. The Allen Iversons. You know, when I think of Russ, I think of Allen Iverson. The reason why that comparison comes into play, it's not for their playing styles, because at age 32, Russell Westbrook literally, and I didn't even mention this before, and I don't know how I forgot this, but dunked on Bismack Biyombo so nasty that I promise you, I thought Russell Westbrook was 24 years old. He took off from inside the arc and lifted and hit Biyombo and went higher and yammed it on Bismack Biyombo's head. So much so after the game, Bismack Biyombo dapped up Russ, and they laughed about it. I'm sorry, bro. You're not dapping me up at the dunking on my head. We got to fight. You got to see these hands. See me. See me, bro. That ain't happening. But I'm not Bismack Biyombo. But Russ yammed it on him so nasty. And all I can think about, this man is 32 years old. He's had knee surgeries. He's supposed to be out of his prime. People are so hard on him because the team is not, quote unquote, winning. He's not a winner, even though he gives it his all in the court. But he's not a winner. It's somehow all Russ's fault, even though that team was losing before Russ got there. But yet he somehow manages to come to the Wizards and get all the blame put on him. Why is that? Why do we do that? And I brought up Allen Iverson before because Allen Iverson dealt with a lot of these same things too. But the big difference with Allen Iverson is that people question his attitude. People question his work ethic. Allen Iverson notoriously was quoted as saying he didn't lift weights. He didn't need to. Basketball was his weights. He could hoop. He didn't need to lift weights. It messed up his shot. But guess what? Russell Westbrook lifts the weights. He's at the practices. He's cheering on his teammates. He's giving it all every single night. But he's still not getting the respect. Still not getting the respect. But I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to tell you, he's going to get the respect from me. And as long as I have this platform, he's going to get the respect going forward. So shout out to you, Russell Westbrook, now and forever. We respect you, King, as a legend, a living NBA legend. And I do not want you to be retired and gone from the NBA before you get your flowers. You're getting your flowers right now, King. Shout out to you, Russell Westbrook. Stephen A. Smith, tighten up, homie. You are an influence on my career and my career path. You were one of the greats, Ahmad Rashad. A lot of people who have great platforms like yourself. But I just caution you, please be cautious of your wording. And yes, you may not have cursed him out or called him outside of his name. But it's feeling too often now that you're making these battles personal. And I don't want you to turn into a caricature of yourself. You are a legend. Be that. But be cautious of your words. Because my man Russ, we're not going to nullify all them stats, bro. We're not doing that. I'm sorry. We're not. Keep it 100 when it comes to Russ. All right, folks, we're going to wrap up this topic here. We're going to take a quick commercial break. On the other half of the break, we're going to get into the MLB opening day. Finally, opening day is here. We have MLB opening day. We're going to break down a little bit of the opening day, some power rankings, what to look out for this year, and some changes that you may not have heard about this past offseason coming up for this current season. And then we're going to end our show talking about one of Russell Westbrook's former teammates, Kevin Durant, and how he's managed to get himself in some more trouble. But all that's going to happen on the other half of this break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Shaq Scott, and man, have we had a great show thus far today. We opened the show talking about NCAA March Madness Mania. We talked about the men and women's bracket, got into a little bit of my predictions. I may have got a little bit angry at Kim Mulkey and her comments on COVID testing in regards to NCAA tournament. Then we went on to talk about Russell Westbrook and his battle versus Stephen A. Smith. And now we're going to get into the topic of MLB opening day. And a little bit later, we're going to talk about Kevin Durant and his beef on social media. And it's been a great show thus far today, man. You guys got me sweating in the studio. I'm getting heated. I'm giving it my all like Russell Westbrook for you guys, you know. I'm giving it my all. But MLB opening day is just around the corner. At the time of this recording, we are less than a day away from MLB opening day. And by the time this podcast comes out, MLB opening day would have started. And you can just smell the popcorn in the air, hear the Take Me Out to the Ball Game. I won't sing that song because I heard that family is very litigious. You can smell the sod and the clay. You can hear the crack of the bat. And you can look forward to some bat flipping because the MLB season for 2021 is underway. It's back. And we got you covered here on the GSMC Sport Podcast. And a bunch of you may be saying, Shaq, finally, man, finally, the sport I've been waiting for, baseball. You talked about basketball enough. You done talked about the NCAA tournament. You talked about the NBA. You even talked about football. Can we talk about some baseball? Of course we are. The GSMC Sports Podcast, baby, we got you covered. We're going to talk about your baseball here. I had to wait for the season to start. And it's here. Finally, spring training is over. We're here for opening day. And we finally have a 2021 season starting for baseball. And not one that's a part of a bubble or a weird situation of condensed games or anything like that. Normal 2021 opening day baseball season for the MLB. And if you don't recall, last year we had the Los Angeles Dodgers winning a condensed MLB season. We even had some surprises like the Miami Marlins making the playoffs for the first time. So we have a lot to look forward to this year. And to start things off, I kind of wanted to get into what to expect this year, some teams to look out for. I recently came across an article. Shout out to MLB.com. They just recently dropped their 2021 power rankings ahead of opening day. And I kind of wanted to go through and give my thoughts and opinions on whether or not some of these teams I think will be number one for the duration of the season, or if we may see some drop-off. So they have number one being the Los Angeles Dodgers. And that's not that surprising. I mentioned before that the Dodgers are coming off of a World Series. And if, upon me recalling and going back into my memory, because it feels like the Dodgers won this World Series 20 years ago, at this point. But it literally was last year. You remember the Dodgers won the World Series, and in the midst of a World Series, the Dodgers had a player that tested positive for the coronavirus celebrate with the rest of his team without a mask. And it was a whole thing, but we kind of brushed over it because LA had a champion again, and then the Lakers would go on to win the championship. But that was a thing at one point. But 2021, the Dodgers looking strong, and they have a closer by the name of Kenley Jansen, who is someone that MLB.com has as a player to watch out for. And I would have to say that I would agree. He played really, really well in the most recent Cactus League season. So this is a player who's going to be on the lookout for the Los Angeles Dodgers this year. And there's been some highlights of him, and he's been looking pretty dang good. Like I believe there's a highlight that came out on him, I want to say about 2 weeks ago, and he struck out the side, and I was like, yo, who the heck is this kid? And I had to look closely because I hadn't been watching baseball in a while, but sure enough, it was Jansen. And he's a closer for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and someone we're going to look out for, and someone that's probably going to keep them in contention for the World Series championship again. Number 2 here, they got the Padres, the San Diego Padres, and quite honestly, this is my favorite team to watch. And how can you not enjoy watching the Padres when they have a player like Fernando Tatis Jr.? And Tatis Jr. has taken off not just on the field but off the field. He's had sponsorships. I've seen him in Gatorade commercials, for the MLB video game commercials. He's all over the place. A young kid, exciting to watch, bat flipping king. You know, he's very notorious for letting the pitchers know that, I got the best of you for this one. And the traditional baseball viewers and traditional baseball players aren't the biggest fans of him. But me, somebody who's 28 years old, who's been watching baseball a lot more as of late, I enjoy watching this young man play, and I'm looking forward to him playing this year. And number 3, they got here the New York Yankees, and I feel like the Yankees, they're always in attention just based off name alone, but the Yankees were pretty active this past offseason. And if you had to think about it from afar, they kind of underachieved with the amount of talent they had around them, but they can't stay healthy. And in particular, Giancarlo Stanton has been hurt the past 2 seasons. And if he's able to stay healthy this year, I do think the Yankees will be a formidable opponent this year, and they could be a team that give the Dodgers a run for their money. We shall see. But a healthy Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge is still a player to watch. But MLB.com has Clint Frazier, who's been appointed the starting left fielder since spring training opened, as a person to watch for the New York Yankees, and they've gone as far as to even say he may make the All-Star game. And that's something that I won't necessarily disagree with. He's a young baby-faced looking kid, and he's pretty confident. If you aren't familiar with him, Clint Frazier is a person who's not afraid to let you know, like, I belong in the MLB. And why not, man? I appreciate that type of confidence. It's hard to make it to the majors. It's very hard to make it to the majors. So when you make it there, celebrate it. Celebrate it, my guy. Celebrate it. So we got the Yankees at number 3 according to MLB.com. Number 4, they got the Atlanta Braves. We're going to come back to the Braves. I want to talk about them. Number 5, they got the Chicago White Sox. We're going to get through the top 10 here. And then the rest of the field, they got the Twins, Mets, the Rays, the Blue Jays, the Cardinals, the Astros, the A's, the Brewers, the Cubs, the Nationals. That's a round of top 15. And then the worst team they expect this year to be the Pittsburgh Pirates. Pittsburgh Pirate, according to the MLB.com power rankings, they have the Pittsburgh Pirates coming in last place this year. And I can't say I disagree with that, but I will say there may be a team that may give them a run for their money because they always have, as of late, have been struggling. And I'm going to say the Arizona Diamondbacks are going to be fighting for that last place with the Pittsburgh Pirates this year, But let's not hinder on negativity. We're all about positivity here on the GSMC podcast. And I feel like I've had a lot of vitriol thus far in the show. And I want to keep it on a positive note. So let's focus on the top 5 teams. So we talked about the Yankees, the Padres, and the Dodgers already for the top 3. But MLB.com has the Atlanta Braves as the number 4 team. And according to MLB.com, the Braves start in 5. They have a long history of success, and they're relatively young. That it's a pretty young group. They got Max Fried, Mike Soroka, Ian Anderson, and they're all young. And Acuna, who's not listed in this article here, is a person who is still active on that roster and is going to have a huge impact for that roster. That's another player that I personally enjoy watching. Fernando Tatis and Ronald Acuna. Two players that I am going to enjoy watching this year, and they both are on the lookout for me, and they're both in the top 5 of the MLB.com, so it lets me know I'm not alone in that opinion. Number 5 to round out the top 5 for MLB.com, they had the Chicago White Sox. And I'm not going to lie to you, the Chicago White Sox, they're like the Gonzaga Bulldogs for me. You know, I am aware of them. I know who they are. I watch their games, and I'm never super sold on them. But I will admit, going into this season, the White Sox probably, I won't say probably, but some can argue that they have one of the better bullpens in baseball. They got Garrett Crochet, Michael Kopech, and they just signed a new closer, Liam Hendricks. These are all people in that bullpen for the Chicago White Sox that could have them threatening to move up from that top 5 spot to potentially be number 1. But for me, I'm not sure if I'm completely sold on the idea. They got Dallas Keuchel, Luis Giolito. I always struggle with his name. They're in the starting staff, and in the starting lineup for the White Sox, so they're always a threat. But we shall see. I don't know if I'm completely sold on the Chicago White Sox. I hate that I gave them the Gonzaga Bulldogs of the MLB, but that's just my own personal opinion, you know. But to keep on the topic of the MLB, to prepare you for this 2021 season, I want to make sure you guys are aware of a couple of things to look forward to for the 2021 season. So, as we know, post-2020, post-pandemic, a lot of changes were made in the world, and the sports world was no different. You know, we saw changes to protocols. We saw teams tightening up their budgets, and we saw the league as a whole tighten up their budget. The MLB downsized a lot. We lost a lot of our minor league teams, and that's something that hurt me as a person who resides in a place that has access to several minor league teams. I enjoy every now and then going out and catching the Phillies in Clearwater, or going to catch the Yankees, or going to catch the Braves. But the MLB has downsized their minor league teams, and a lot of those MLB major league teams still made their way down to Florida and different places like that for spring training, but minor league teams aren't as prevalent as they once were because of budget cuts that were made all due to the pandemic. And I know that I honestly believe that these are changes that are always the MLB had in mind, because if the pandemic has showed us anything, is that whatever happened was always going to happen. It just got kind of expedited because of the pandemic. So I truly believe the MLB always wanted to downsize. They just had a reason now, finally, with the pandemic to say, okay, cool, we can trim some fat, they like to say, and cut down on some of these minor league teams, which sucks. It honestly sucks overall, because these are people's jobs. These are players' livelihoods. Some players who always have these hopes of making it to the major league, it got a little bit tougher for them. But the MLB not only made changes to the minor league system, they made changes to the major leagues this year overall. There were some changes and some things that were collectively bargained in the offseason between Rob Manfred and the Players Association. They went back and forth on a bunch of things. So we have an MLB article here. We have an article pulled up here from Bleacher Report that kind of details the changes here that were made for this upcoming season. And I want to take the time today on the GSMC podcast to go through this article and discuss some of those things with you that you may not have quite noticed because, you know, just the pandemic happened or you just weren't paying attention. So the article starts here saying, after the coronavirus pandemic forced many changes in 2020, the 2021 season will see the return of a 162-game schedule and 10-team postseason, but not the return of the universal designated hitter. So that is something that was new last year that the MLB tried out, and to me it was a success, and it was something I was hoping to see going forward. You know, I like the idea of the MLB playing with the rules a little bit, in particular to this league as other leagues, because the MLB struggles a lot with its viewership. So baseball is a sport that's traditionally just an older generation. So you got the average consumer and viewer being that 35 to 55 demographic. But that persuadable 18 to 29-year-old demographic is something that's a little bit harder to attract for the MLB. And so last year was a chance for them to say, you know what, why not take a chance now? You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We already got a shortened season, and we're going to have a lot more eyes on the season probably normally wouldn't have had because people are starved for sports and a lot of newer viewers than we probably would have had in the past. And so they took the chance of that, and you play with the idea of universal designated hitter. They also did the 7-inning double headers and automatic runners on second base and extra innings. They did these type of things in the condensed season last year. So they won't bring back the universal designated hitter. However, they are going to be bringing back the 7-inning double headers and the automatic runners on second base and extra innings, which is huge for me because that shows me that MLB is not afraid to make some change. It's great to see them step outside of that comfort zone because people are afraid of change, you know. Who isn't? We all are. We're afraid of change. We're uncomfortable with being comfortable. But sometimes it takes that you just got to take that step in the right direction because you never know what's on the other side on that. And in this situation for me, on the other side of it for the MLB is more viewership, is a younger demographic, is to welcome a whole new diverse crowd. And if 2021 coming off of 2020 has not showed us anything, is that we all want to be diverse. We all want to be inclusive. So we want to welcome as much viewers as we can. And maybe some of those traditional views or traditional rules was kind of daunting for the casual fan. They may have thought from the outside, man, this sport is long, it's boring. But once you get into it, you realize how great of a sport baseball is. It is one of the most amazing things to watch, live and on TV. And for the MLB to be willing enough to make changes, especially Rob Manfred, who was a little bit of a stubborn GM in my personal opinion. I mean, a stubborn commissioner in my personal opinion. But he's willing to be open enough to make the change and to welcome in the 7-inning doubleheaders and the automatic runners on second base and extra innings, which is great. But those rules are all taking place in the majors. And in this article, they are going to detail a little bit more of the changes that are made in the minor leagues, which in my personal opinion, if we're being quite honest, is a little bit more exciting than some of the ones that are taking place in the majors. But before we get into that, let's go over a little bit more of the changes that are being made in the majors. So this year, the MLB is going to crack down on the pitchers using foreign substances. And you may be saying, foreign substances? What are you talking about? Like, what are they using? What could pitchers be using? So access to in-game video isn't the only solid that MLB is going to be doing for the league's hitters in 2021. After decades of relying on a sort of honor system, the league will finally be policing ball doctoring. Specifically, the league will try to prevent pitchers from using foreign substances on the ball through such measures as compliance officers and lab inspections. Crucially, it would also be monitoring pitchers' spin rates for suspicious activities. So what that means is that no longer are we going to see pitchers use the substances to kind of get a better grip on the ball and not see any consequences from it. And in this particular article, there's a picture of a pitcher with a substance on his hand. So the MLB in the past has kind of used the honor system to say, hey, we know you guys are using the approved substances there. It's approved but not approved. It's kind of like an honor system, kind of like, yeah, it's all a part of the game. But they're cracking down on that. And I have to think that a lot of this is coming on the heels of that Houston Astros debacle that we witnessed a couple seasons ago. In addition to this, the MLB will be adding in-game video now on iPads. So officially for social distancing reasons and ostensibly because of the Houston Astros sign stealing scandal, players and coaches weren't allowed to access video replay rooms during last season. And that was coming off of the heels of the Houston Astros debacle. But now, this year, in-game video is due for a comeback in 2021, but with the twist. Video of at-bats will be made available on iPads and teams' dugouts with the opposing catcher's signs edited out as a way to provide hitters the means to analyze their swings during games, while also protecting the opposition against having their signs stolen. This seems like a fair compromise. So you may be saying that's not big, but that's huge. So in football, we see a quarterback throw an interception, go off the field, sit on the sidelines, and they can study that play and like up and down. They can look at their iPads, they look at the Microsoft Surface tablets that they have, and they go through and they say, oh, this player was in the wrong position, or I didn't see this defensive back in this position, I made the wrong read. You can now do that in baseball. So imagine a batter, a Giancarlo Stanton going up, and he struck out 3 times in a row. And he's able to go and look and analyze his last 3 at-bats and say, dang, why do I keep striking out? What's going on? And he's able to see, oh, I'm doing this. Okay, this is what he's doing. And he goes up for that 4th at-bat and bang, smacks one out of the park. And you may be saying, man, that's stupid. Why are we doing this? Well, I caution you to get away from that traditional point of view. Welcome in these new ideas. It's great. This is something that entices the casual fan. This would entice me. If you were to give this to the casual fan and let them know, like, hey, baseball players are going to be able to analyze their at-bats, but you don't have to worry about sign stealing. It's going to be edited out, but they're going to be able to analyze their at-bats and use that to their advantage. I'm all in, and you should be too. Now, going away from the major leagues, I told you about the minor leagues making some changes. And in AAA, they're going to have larger, less slippery bases. You may be saying, well, why is that such a big deal? Well, the first base, second base, and third bases are going to be larger. They're going from 15 inches to 18 inches per side. They're also going to be made of a material that will supposedly be less slippery in wet conditions. There will be fewer than 90 feet between bases. The size difference might lead to an increase in infield hits and successful stolen base attempts. But since said difference also slightly extends the reach of fielders, such things aren't necessarily for sure things. So, if nothing else, the new bases, it should help prevent the injury. So a lot of times we see blown out knees or torn ACLs, blown out knees, broken ankles, shins, a lot of nasty looking plays from players sliding into first base, second base, or third base, coming in hot, running hard, and because the bases being so small and the infielders protecting those bases, a lot of these collisions are being very rough on their bodies. And so the MLB is playing with the idea of making these bases a little bit bigger in the minor leagues. And that lets me know, like, we're going to use our minor league as our guinea pigs. And if it works out and if the numbers aren't crazy, so hopefully we don't see like a crazy influx in stolen bases or infield hits. And it's just enough of a change to say, okay, we do notice a trend that we have less injuries now. And it's something the major leagues may want to adapt. You know, that's something I'm still kind of on the fence about. That one doesn't entice me, but I don't know if I'm 100% sold on that. Time will tell on that. In the AA, the infielders must set up on the infield dirt. That's a change that's going to be made. And then in the high A, pitchers must step off the rubber to attempt pickoff throws. Now, this one is one that kind of stuck out for me. So, if you guys remember, Andy Pettitte was very notorious for his pickoff move to first base. You know, he was a left-hander, and he would constantly get batters being very overzealous and greedy with a pickoff. But now the MLB is proposing that at the high level in 2021, all pitchers must step off of the rubber before they make a pickoff throw. So you can't kind of be on the rubber and off the rubber, kind of be in the middle. You got to be completely off to make that pickoff throw. So that makes it a little bit easier for those base runners to not get caught in those pickoff situations. So that's going to be definitely interesting to watch in the minor leagues, and we'll see how that one plays out. A couple of other ones. I'll try to brush through these last ones. Let me see. Okay, so this is the last one that I'll go through that stuck out before we get to our commercial break. So in the low A southeast of the minor leagues, they're going to try out automated balls and strikes. So players ticketed who are going to be playing in the low A southeast league, they have to have open minds, just to say the least. I'm trying to say this in the kindest way possible. They need to be open-minded because they're going to be robot umpires. There's a Freudian slip. They're going to be robot umpires. Robot umpires are coming to MLB, and a lot of fans and analysts have kind of suggested at this idea for a while that we're putting a lot on our umpires on the naked eye to catch things, and you're relying on somebody's strike zone to be the same as another person's. But we're finally playing with the idea of saying, you know what? Let's bring these robot umpires. So for the first time in any affiliated Major League Baseball, and this is in the minor leagues, there's going to be an automated system for calling balls and strikes in 2021. Umpires will still call balls and strikes on the field, but only after getting an audio cue prompted by a Hawkeye pitch tracking technology. Shout out to that company, Hawkeye Pitch Tracking Technology, because if this works, that could mean a lot for them financially. And this isn't a GSMC business podcast, but it may be a company you wanted to keep an eye out for in the future, because if they haven't already, they're going to be a company that might see a rise in their stock, all due to this partnership with the MLB. But I digress. To their credit, umpires have gotten better at calling both strikes. This is from the article. Both pitches inside the zone and out, and balls, since the introduction of StatCast in 2015. But since they're still far from perfect on both fronts, the appeal of an automated zone is obvious. Like the pickoff rules, this experiment could have lasting repercussions for the catching position, because it will make pitch framing obsolete, teams would have every reason to ignore that talent and emphasize that their catching prospects master game calling, blocking, and throwing. So if this were to go into effect in our future, let's imagine a 5-year future where this is in effect. It's going to change the catcher position forever. So this is one that there's a lot of pushback for obvious reasons because it doesn't just have effect on the game as a whole, but has an effect on positions. And you want to talk about tradition. To flat out change the way we train our catchers and coach them up in the game, because the idea of having robot umpires is interesting, to say the least. Very interesting. But I just encourage you fans to have an open mind, the MLB to continue to have an open mind, and let's just all be happy and grateful that we're going to have baseball this year. And we're going to make sure we thank Zachary Reimer of Bleacher Report for this great article and keeping us up to speed on the changes coming to MLB. I'm excited. I hope you guys are excited. Let me know how you feel. But for now, we're going to take another quick commercial break. On the other side of this break, I'm going to finally get down to the topic that you all have been waiting for. What beef has KD gotten himself into? And by KD, I'm talking about Kevin Durant, of course. He's beefing with somebody else on social media, and this time it might have a lot more repercussions. But we can't get into that until we take a quick commercial break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast with your boy Shaq Scott. Thank you guys for listening thus far. We have covered it all. We've gone through the MLB the MLB opening day. We talked about Russell Westbrook versus the world, in particular the world being Stephen A. Smith. We also talked about the NCAA March Madness Mania, the men and women's tournament. I gave you a little bit of my opinion on Kim Mulkey and a little bit of her opinion on the NCAA and this decision to continue to COVID test these men and women. And now, the moment you all have been waiting for, the reason you're probably stuck around this long to hear me gas back thus far is to talk about this KD social media beef. Kevin Durant, KD, Kevin Durant, Slim Reaper, whatever you want to call him, one of the greats in the NBA. We talked about greats. You got to give him his respect. Kevin Durant is a great in the NBA. He's hurt right now, but he's a member of the Brooklyn Nets. Kevin Durant is a great basketball player, member of the Brooklyn Nets. Recently, has gotten himself into a back and forth on social media, a beef, a tiffy, a kerfuffle, a duel, whatever you want to call it, with Michael Rappaport. And I'm going to go through a little bit of the history of Michael Rappaport and Kevin Durant. But if you may be wondering, you said, Shaq, you said again on social media. What do you mean? And if you're not familiar with Kevin Durant and social media, allow me to reintroduce you to Kevin Durant and social media. So, we're going to go back in time to, hop in the DeLorean with me. We're going to go back in time to 2017, and we're right after the Golden State Warriors won the 2017 NBA championship. And Kevin Durant's on Twitter. And Kevin Durant tweets out on Twitter that in a response to a fan. And in this tweet, he, to paraphrase, says, man, I respect Kevin Durant for having the guts to go out and win it all. And in spite of the criticism he's received, and give me one good legitimate reason why Kevin Durant leaving OKC is not the right decision. And Kevin Durant responded he didn't like the organization or playing for Billy Donovan. His roster wasn't good, or maybe it just wasn't a good fit between him and Russ. And notice I said Kevin Durant said he didn't like the organization or playing for Billy Donovan. Yes, Kevin Durant spoke in third person, folks, in this response to a fan's opinion on Kevin Durant, of him not respecting Kevin Durant winning the NBA championship in 2017. And Kevin Durant responded by saying, oh, maybe Kevin Durant didn't like the organization, or maybe he didn't like playing for Billy Donovan. Kevin Durant forgot that he was logged into his actual Twitter account and responding to a fan. So what that let us all know is that Kevin Durant had what we call a burner account. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what a burner account is, allow me to bring you to my generation and let you know what some of us do with social media. So you have your official account on social media, and you may have a separate account on social media that you call your burner account. Your burner account is like your alter ego, an additional personality. It's where you go to give opinions where you don't want people to trace those opinions back to you. And that's something that you see a lot done by younger generation, what we call trolls, people who are trying to garner attention from people, or just want to get some things off of their chest without being held responsible for it. And little did we all know, Kevin Durant was no different like the average man. He also had a burner account, which I'm not judging him for. What I am judging him for is forgetting to log out of his official account and tweet this from his burner account. So instead of tweeting this criticism or this response to this as a fan from his burner account, in which he thought that he was hiding under the disguise of burner account, he tweeted it from his official account. And the internet exploded, and everybody just let him have it. So in particular, I just remember people saying, oh, Kevin Durant has secret accounts to defend himself. How could he be afraid to, go ahead and clap back as his own personality? He has to use a burner account. And in this particular article from NBC Sports from 2017, Kevin Durant flat out was not regretting getting caught. He flat out said, I don't regret clapping back at anybody or talking to fans on my Twitter. I do regret using my former coach's name and the former organization I played for. That was childish. That was idiotic. All those type of words. I apologize for that. But he was on a podcast last year, the All the Smoke podcast, hosted by Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson, and he was directly quoted as saying, I still have a burner account. Yeah, I still do. And I probably won't ever stop doing it. And many people ask why. And who am I to tell him what he should and should not do? That is a grown man under his own ideas and whatever he may decide to live his life. That's whatever he wants to do. But I say all that to let you know a little bit more of a background to who Kevin Durant is on social media and his presence. So we know him as a great player on the court. And off the court, he's not afraid to engage with fans. And he also is a person who doesn't put up for slander on his name, which I can respect. I can respect that. A person who doesn't put up with somebody disrespecting them or putting slander on their name, because too often times we got these public figures and we think just because they're public figures, they're not humans. And we put them on these pedestals and we idolize them, and we don't allow them to be human and to have flaws. And that's not fair. And I'm not sitting here defending Kevin Durant, but I'm letting you know the reality of the matter, that Kevin Durant is still a human being. So the fact of him having a burner account is not too surprising for me. What's surprising is the fact that he got caught. That's surprising. But fast forward, we're going to go back into our DeLorean, come all the way back to March 30th, 2021. And this article is also from Bleacher Report from Tyler Conway. And it's titled, Michael Rappaport Shares Homophobic, Misogynistic DMs from Kevin Durant of the Brooklyn Nets. So you may be saying, whoa, what a headline there. What do you mean homophobic, misogynistic DMs from Kevin Durant? Yes, you heard me correct. And for those of you who are unfamiliar who Michael Rappaport is, allow me to introduce you to Michael Rappaport. Michael Rappaport is a very famous actor, comedic actor, whatever you may want to call him. He has over 60 films. He's a famous actor from the 90s in films of personal favorites of mine like Higher Learning. And he's well known, put it that way. He's a native New Yorker, very proud of the fact that he's from New York, supports his New York teams, and is always quoted as being critical of these New York teams and an overall sports head. He loves sports, just like those of you that are listening to this podcast. So it's not surprising to see him and Kevin Durant's name attached to each other. What is surprising, the manner in which it's attached to each other. And so when I get the headline, Michael Rappaport shares homophobic, misogynistic DMs from Kevin Durant, I honestly took a step back, and initially I was like, Kevin Durant had to get hacked. There's no way. Before even reading any of the exchange between them, he had to get hacked. I just assumed that a fan got the best of his account, and they just went in and were going in on Michael Rappaport, and Kevin Durant was a victim of a hacking. But to my surprise, that wasn't the case. And to keep this podcast appropriate, I'm not going to go into the exact verbiage that was used, but I will read from Michael Rappaport's Twitter account and just him kind of quoting in a grand scheme of what he received from Kevin Durant. So this is a direct quote from Michael Rappaport's Twitter account. So Michael Rappaport says, "I receive threats and disgusting messages daily, but never in my wildest dreams did I think that at KDTrade5, which is Kevin Durant's Twitter, would be among them. The snake emoji himself is now threatening me, bringing up my wife, and wants to fight. This is supposed to be America's sweetheart, right? ? I'm the real MVP. Hashtag." So, it's a lot to uncover here. And I have my own personal opinions about Michael Rappaport, and I will save those for another time. But he is no stranger to the headlines. I'll just say that to keep it lightly. He's no stranger to the headlines. And he's a person that enjoys the spotlight, especially when it involves sports. So, to see him and Kevin Durant going back and forth is not something that's abnormal to me. But if you are a person, I will highly warn you that these tweets are not safe for work. So if you're a person who is going to look up this article or look up these tweets, I will warn you there is some very inappropriate language used throughout from both parties. But in the verbiage back and forth, Kevin Durant does use some pretty strong language in describing the type of person Michael Rappaport is. He also references Charles Barkley and how Michael Rappaport is basically kissing up to Charles Barkley and how Charles Barkley is an idiot, just as much as Michael Rappaport. He invites Michael Rappaport to fight him at one point in these exchanges. Goes on and calls him names, some names that are quite inappropriate to say the least. All these words are inappropriate, but this is a lot to have the public read, and all of this would have not been shared if not for Michael Rappaport sharing these exchanges with the world. And as tough as it is for me to explain to you what was said between the two parties without getting into the details, I will just go from a grand perspective. There was some homophobic verbiage used, not necessarily homophobic slurs, but there were some homophobic inferences used from Kevin Durant in reference to Michael Rappaport. He was encouraging Michael Rappaport to do certain acts to Kevin Durant and calling him names that in the past have been used to describe homophobic people. I mean, not homophobic people, to describe, used by homophobic people to describe homosexuals. Also in these exchanges, Kevin Durant references Dave Portnoy and how afraid Michael Rappaport is of Dave Portnoy. And if you aren't familiar who Dave Portnoy is, he is the owner of Barstool Sports, one of the hugest sports platforms out there. Another controversial sports platform. I'm sure a lot of people have their own personal opinions about that platform. But in this particular situation, the reason I bring them up is because Michael Rappaport was employed by Barstool Sports, but last year filed a defamation lawsuit against Barstool. I'm sorry, in 2018, he filed a defamation lawsuit against Barstool Sports, alleging that they defamed him and they owed him money for his 8 months that he was employed by the company, and that they defamed his name, claimed that he falsely had sexually transmitted diseases to their public. And there's an ongoing battle that still is ongoing to this day. This case has not been solved. Still ongoing to this day between Michael Rappaport and Barstool Sports. So I bring that up to say that Kevin Durant references the fact of that he basically calls Michael Rappaport a coward, that he does anything for attention, and he even in these quotes said that President Trump didn't pay any attention to you, so now you want to use everybody else to get your views and your laugh. Your life is a joke. You're a blankety blank blank blank. Tell them to go get some sun. Use your brains, a piece of blankety blank. Tell them to go, and then Michael Rappaport just keeps responding to Kevin Durant by saying, help the kids of Brownsville, Brooklyn. There's kids who need your help. Help the kids of Brownsville, Brooklyn. And a lot of this is just gossipy for me, man. And I just honestly was not expecting to wake up and see Kevin Durant's name in the headlines with Michael Rappaport in this fashion. You know, it's two sides to this. And so we're going to talk about both sides before we close out the podcast. And let's start with the Kevin Durant side. Actually, let's start with the Michael Rappaport side. I'm sorry. Let's start there. Michael Rappaport has a lot less to lose than Kevin Durant at this point. Kevin Durant is still very much more relevant, in my personal opinion, than Michael Rappaport. Michael Rappaport is an actor, an established one. But if we're being quite honest, he's on the back ends of his career. This is not an Oscar every year nominated, a name that's floated out there as one of the greatest actors of all time. He's not the Kevin Durant of the acting game. Not at all. So he has nothing to lose when it comes to this situation. And it says a lot to me that he ended his referencing to this exchange with Kevin Durant as signing it off with hashtag I'm the real MVP. And that's a shot at Kevin Durant, because if you don't recall, Kevin Durant, when he won his MVP, was very emotional and referenced his mother in very viral fashion through tears, said, "You the real MVP, Mom." And Michael Rappaport kind of takes a shot at Kevin Durant here, saying hashtag I'm the real MVP, and talking about these threats that he received. And it just comes across as odd. And I'm not excusing Kevin Durant's behavior at all, but to see Michael Rappaport engage with this battle back and forth with Kevin Durant, and then to be taking these shots, it just doesn't sit right with me. And then as I look to Kevin Durant, because we're a sports podcast, so I want to focus on the athlete in this situation. And Kevin Durant, my friend, I talked about Stephen A. Smith being respectful to athletes when he's referring to them, and I'm going to make sure I'm doing the same thing here with my platform right now. As a friend, and I say that jokingly, but as an admirer of your on-the-court capabilities and your on-the-court skill set, this is corny. This is incredibly corny. First of all, to be engaging back and forth with Michael Rappaport is incredibly corny. And then on top of that, to use the verbiage you use is not right. It's downright wrong. And who knows the ramifications that are going to come for this, and rightfully so, there should be some. If you recall, back in the day, Kobe Bryant got fined. He didn't get suspended for using homophobic slurs, as did other NBA players. And we clearly have not learned our lesson, because we're looking at an NBA player here who's inferring homophobic things to another celebrity, not another athlete in this situation, but another celebrity. And these leaking to the general public lets us kind of see a little bit behind the scenes. And if this is the person that Kevin Durant is behind the scenes, that's not cool, man. It's not, flat out. I talked about earlier in the show how 2021 should be the idea of being more diverse and inclusive. And for you to have this platform and to be an athlete and to use it this way, it's not right. It's not right. I encourage you to use your platform in an uplifting way. To look at someone like a Russell Westbrook who's doing his all to use his platform to uplift those. And yes, I get that doesn't mean you get disrespected by anybody. And if Kevin Durant feels like he was disrespected by Michael Rappaport, I wholeheartedly agree that you do have the right to respond. But as I mentioned earlier, words matter. What you say and how you say it matters. He could have responded in an aggressive way. He could have cursed him out if he wanted to. But some of this stuff that I'm reading here, there's no room for it. There's no room for it. Absolutely none. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that we're in 2021 still having this conversation. And I know for a fact the NBA is going to look into this. And Kevin Durant is out right now nursing an injury. And I would not be surprised if he did not face a fine from Adam Silver. Because especially coming off of the heels of, we see Myers Leonard is having a hard time finding an NBA job because he was caught on a streaming platform while playing a video game saying a racial slur about the Jewish community. He got traded from the Miami Heat, sent to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who then released him. He can't get a job right now. He got fined by the NBA and can't get a job right now, and suspended from a team and can't get a job right now. But we got Kevin Durant, one of our leaders in the NBA, talking like this with Michael Rappaport. Michael Rappaport of all people. You're throwing away money for Michael Rappaport. He's not worth it. You should not be talking like this at all, let alone Michael Rappaport. Do not let him antagonize you. Don't do it, Kevin Durant. It's not worth it. And since then, Kevin Durant has apologized to Michael Rappaport, saying, and this could be taken multiple ways, jokingly, that I thought me and Michael Rappaport had this type of relationship where we could joke back and forth. We have conversations like this all the time. Worse things are said, but little did I know that I must have really hurt his feelings. And I'm paraphrasing here. And that doesn't excuse the behavior, Kevin Durant. You're saying all these things to me. That doesn't excuse the behavior. I'm sorry. You got a platform. You have the right to your social media platform. And if this year has not told us anything, you should be using it. You should be using it in the right way. You can't be on here spazzing out on Michael Rappaport, using this verbiage and this inferred language. Like, it's not right. Grow up. Grow up. And you may say, man, who are you? Who are you to tell me how to react? You're right. Who am I to tell you how to react? But I can't tell somebody when something's wrong, because I would hope they will hold me to that same standard. Hold me to that same standard. I got a platform just as much as you do. Your platform may be a little bit greater than mine, but guess what? You still got a platform nonetheless. And I'm not one of those people who's going to say, you got kids looking up to you. I don't rely on my athletes and celebrities to raise my kids. I don't feel like people should do that. There's parents, there's guardians, there's people in their lives who do that. So I don't look for athletes to do that. Charles Barkley said years ago, I'm not a role model. I'm not a role model. And I'm not looking for Kevin Durant to be a role model. What I am looking for Kevin Durant to be is a respectful human being. And this back and forth between Michael Rappaport, it's not cool. It's not right. Not right at all. So tighten up, Kevin Durant. Tighten up. Maybe he needs to take a break from social media. You know, some of us, every now and then, becomes too much. And I'm a person who's been guilty of it. You know, if I had to give you some advice, Kevin Durant, take a break, man. Take a break. LeBron goes 0 dark 30 where he takes off social media every playoff run. Maybe you need to take a break now, Kevin Durant. Now. Take a break. Cool off. Cool off. From the burner too. Not just the main account, the burner account too. Cool off. There's got to be something else you can do with that time. Got to be. Get some pent-up aggression. Learn something. Read a book. My mom used to always say, cut the TV off. Read a book. You're bored, read a book. Read a book. And Kevin Durant is doing a lot of great things off the court. And I don't want this to take away from that. His 35 Ventures company is making a lot of moves off the court, not only for himself, but people looking to get into the industry. So he's doing a lot of great things. I want to make sure I shine light on that. He is using his platform positively. So we do have to give him credit for that. Shout out to you for that, Kevin Durant. I want to be able to highlight more of those things and less of these type of situations with Michael Rappaport. So we don't know if there's going to be ramifications from the NBA. If there are, I do believe there should be some, and rightfully so. Kevin Durant should accept those punishments, and we move forward. Hopefully, as better human beings. And as far as I'm concerned, Michael Rappaport and Kevin Durant shouldn't talk to each other ever again. That should be it. End of the conversation. Speaking of end of the conversation, that is the end of today's show. I thank you guys for tuning in as always. We appreciate you guys for listening. Thank you for listening to another great episode of GSMC Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Shaq Scott. This podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, we would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, write a nice review if you can. It really helps us out. And if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are the GSMC Podcast Network. In particular, this is the GSMC Podcast Network. Podcast show. Apologies. And thank you guys for listening. As always, I look forward to hearing from you on social media and talking to you guys again. It's been fun. But until next time, peace.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.